Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to the Mom on the Verge podcast, where I aim to help you improve your sense of joy, purpose, and meaning in this life. We will talk about a lot of different ways we can do this, but ultimately, we'll be working toward finding our way back home to ourselves and remembering that even in the most challenging times, peace is only a breath away. I am your host, Katie Farinas, a mom, nurse, and yogi on a mission to improve mental health and build community in our world. Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. This week, I have a repeat guest on. Her name is Stacey Uhrig. You may remember her from episode 22, which was all about developmental trauma and how the traumas we sustain in childhood can impact us in our adulthood. And it was a really great conversation. I highly recommend that you go back and listen to it if you have not already listened to it. It was episode 22, but I will link it in the show notes as well. This week, she is back to talk about burnout, which I think is a pretty popular topic right now. I think a lot of people have been experiencing burnout over the last couple of years. I think we were experiencing burnout before the pandemic, but it really hit its peak in the pandemic and really caused people to reevaluate a lot of things in their life. And people have made changes. And for some people, that has helped. But for others, they've found that what they thought was causing their burnout actually wasn't. And they still feel burnout despite their circumstances, their external circumstances changing. So Stacey and I really get, down and dirty and talk about what burnout is and what are the potential causes for it. And then we talk a little bit about what you can do about it. And Stacey actually says that burnout is the same thing as a nervous breakdown, which was surprising to me because my image of what a nervous breakdown is different than burnout. But she says that burnout is the breaking down of your nervous system. And so she considers the two to be the same. So it's amazing how language really has an impact on us and can make us, words create images in our minds. And those images can then influence what we think about things and how we handle certain situations. Excuse me. So anyway, it's really great. I will link in the show notes that episode 22, but also some of the other people who Stacey mentioned in this episode that are experts in this topic. And they have websites and social media handles and books and things like that. So if you're interested in taking a deeper dive into the topic of burnout, I will put all of those things as well as Stacey's information in the show notes. So I hope you enjoy the show and I will talk to you at the end. All right. Hi, Stacey. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited.
Me too. We had such an awesome conversation last time, and I'm really excited about this conversation. We had discussed last time the topic of burnout, and we really just touched on it, but I think it's a really important conversation to have, particularly right now. So I'm really glad that you're back so we can have a more in-depth conversation about that.
Yeah.
Burnout is something that's like near and dear to my heart. I work in the medical community as a nurse, and burnout rates are at an all-time high within the medical profession. And I have personally seen just the mass exodus of people in the medical profession because they were so burnt out that people are like quitting their jobs without even having another job in place because they just couldn't do it another day. So but I don't think the medical community is alone. I think, we went through a lot with COVID during those years of COVID, but so did teachers. Everyone did. I think certain working communities were hit a little harder than others. But I think burnout in general is just really high and not even just related to whatever your job is, like burnout in motherhood,
Yeah.
burnout in just balancing if you do work outside the home, balancing between work and home. You could love your job and love being a mom, but trying to balance those two things is sending you into burnout. So
Right.
there's so many ways that people get burnt out. And I'd love to first just say, like, let's just define it. Like, what is burnout? How do we know if we're in burnout?
I think burnout is just a culmination of a lot of things kind of coming to a vortex and creating really honestly, you can use the word burnout, but I just see it as a nervous system breakdown. And if you think about that, there was a time in my 30s where I will say I had a nervous breakdown, but really what was happening is I was burnt out. So, we never really were told what a nervous breakdown is, but it's really about your nervous system overloaded and not being able to hold the capacity of activation in the system, right? So we know for people, burnout, this is my personal opinion, is a visceral barrier, right? So burnout, when someone knows they're burnt out, they're not feeling regulated. They
Mhm.
know they're burnt out because in their body, they're very dysregulated, right? So maybe their mind is ruminating, but also they have a very low capacity for life. Their
Mhm.
coping strategies have been lessened. They're probably feeling some level of sensation and activation in their system that they're either labeling as anxiety or overwhelm or stress or depression, and there's all these symptoms that happen. They're lacking motivation, they feel fatigued, they feel overwhelmed. And then ultimately, what I see is kind of the stopgap for all of that because people push through, push through, push
Mhm.
through, is they get sick. Right. And then the story becomes see, that was so toxic. That was such a toxic work environment. It actually made me sick. But the reality is, and this is again my point of view, the way you're working within the environment is breaking down your nervous system, which is breaking down your immunity.
Okay, that makes
Right.
sense.
This is not to say that there are not toxic work environments, because I have plenty of friends that literally are in toxic work environments that are designed to be make or break.
Mhm.
So I want to honor that. And I know plenty of people, especially I live outside of New York City and New Jersey, Wall Street, number one, it's like, I'm going to break you to make you. So that's not to say that there are not environments that are not toxic, because there are. But what a lot of people find and what I've seen with a lot of either friends, family members, clients is that they leave an environment because they say it's toxic and it's destroying their system and it's destroying them. And maybe they either get into another job, same problem,
Mhm.
different environment, same problem, or they don't go to work at all, thinking now it's going to be all better. And
Right.
this is really the mind flip, is because they don't feel better.
Mhm.
And they have to start actually recognizing their responsibility and their feeling poor and starting to peel back the layers on how am I actually showing up
Mhm.
that's causing my nervous system to feel triggered like this.
Yeah. And and I love everything you just said. I want to go back to a couple of
Yeah.
points. Um One, I guess, was let's go all the way back to like having the nervous breakdown. So I think when we think nervous breakdown, we think like laying in a bed in a dark room, staring at a wall, like totally dysfunctional, right? Unable to like cope with your life and do the things that you need to do on a day-to-day basis. But what you're describing is different than that, right? So can you get a little more granular on what a nervous
So,
breakdown
look,
is?
why do we think that a nervous breakdown is somebody laying in bed staring at a wall? Is that because it was portrayed that way in a movie or on a
Right.
TV series, or that we heard this from our parents or our grandparents? A, we need to ask ourselves that question. B, show me somebody that has burnout that wouldn't want to be laying in their bed in a
Right.
dark room staring at a wall. Truly,
Right.
honestly.
Yeah.
But maybe they can't because there's all of these extra expectations that maybe weren't on that generation. We were just thrown on a bus or go out and play all day. We don't know what
Right.
our parents are doing inside
Right.
the house,
Yeah.
right?
So
So we
true.
have to
Yeah.
think about the context of what you just said.
Yeah. Yeah. So
because that makes a big difference.
it does. It does make a big difference. And I've always thought that how, our expectations of motherhood and parenting is so different from generations in the past. And there were large swaths of time where my parents, I don't know what they were doing, but we were out of
All
the
you know,
house.
they were laying in a dark bedroom
Right.
taking a nap.
Yeah.
You don't know.
You don't
You
know.
don't know.
And as a child, you didn't even think about it. It's just the way that it was. You were just
And I'll
told to go
tell you,
outside.
I can think of a dozen women, a dozen, who have said to me at times of crisis in their life, as a mother, they would put their kids on the bus or take their kids to school, go home and crawl right into bed and be
Hmm.
completely dysfunctional, and then turn that shit around at 2 o'clock and get dressed and go and pull off what they needed to pull off for the next few hours.
Yeah.
But their kids don't know that they've been laying in bed all day.
Right.
I cannot literally count how many people have said that to me.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what's the difference? Do you want to call it burnout? Is that a more acceptable word?
Right.
Do you want to call it a nervous breakdown? I call mine a nervous breakdown. I know that my nervous system broke down after 20 years. I can honestly say 20 years of constant hypervigilance that I didn't even know, by the way, that I was
Yeah.
in constant hypervigilance because it was my state of being.
Yeah.
I didn't know that it could be different. I was kind of envious for people that look like they were moving through life without this sensation, but it was
Hmm.
my normal. And then what I know now about polyvagal theory and the way that the nervous system works and the way that the mind and body are connected, I was in this state for so long that there was a point of time where my mind and body are like, she'll never outrun this.
Hmm.
And so now we're just going to have her collapse and flop, which is the term that's used in polyvagal theory, and get into this dorsal vagal state that then looks like depression,
Hmm.
feels like it doesn't. I always was so confused because I knew I was terminally, like, not terminally, but terminology wise, depressed, but I did
Hmm.
not feel sad. So I always remember people saying, "Are you depressed?" And I would say, "No, I'm not depressed because I'm not sad. I have
Yeah.
great gratitude for what's going on in my life, but I am having a hard time getting out of bed. I'm sludging through the day. I used to be able to do like an Excel workbook of 100 worksheets, and now I can barely open the Excel. And when I do open the Excel, my mind is such a fog. I don't even know how to do that, let alone make a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
And I feel numb inside." But what was really happening is my nervous system was working for me in the
Hmm.
sense that I was in this heightened state for so long for a variety of reasons that at some point my body said, I literally just can't hold this space anymore. And now we're just going to literally collapse it. So you went
Yeah.
from this ventral vagal state, right? This hyper arousal to this dorsal vagal state, which we label as depression.
Hmm. Yeah. But you're saying it could also be also be called a nervous breakdown because
Why not?
your nervous
My
system
nervous
is
system
breaking
was
down.
breaking down. I mean, why
Yeah.
not?
Yeah.
I think we don't use that language
Yeah.
because it sounds so bold. And to be honest with you, when I work with my clients and they come in and they sit down on my couch or I'm seeing them on Zoom and they'll say to me, I'll say, "Tell me what's going on today." "Oh my God, I have so much anxiety. I've been having a panic attack since yesterday." And I'll say, "Okay, so what I hear you saying is that you have an activation in your body. Tell me how you know you're in a panic attack or that you have anxiety."
Mhm.
And then what did they do every single time? They describe a physical, visceral response in their body.
Yeah.
My chest is tight. I have a fluttering in my chest. My throat is tight. My stomach's a mess. My face is flushed, right? They're telling me physical things that are happening in their body.
Mhm.
And then I say to them, okay, in our culture, we have created a name for that, and that is called anxiety. But the
Mhm.
moment we start labeling it with that name, there's no positive connotation to it. So now you're creating a bigger folder for yourself to move. So
Mhm.
what would it look like if you just said, I feel really activated today. My
Yeah.
nervous system is a little hijacked today. I
Mhm.
need to find a way to calm my nervous system, right?
Yeah.
It's like if you have a gaping wound on your arm that's getting infected. I know it needs to be, I know I need more healing here today.
Mhm.
And so, same thing with nervous breakdown. I think it has this really negative connotation where burnout almost
Mhm.
is like a, I'm going to curse, like a fucking badge,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Let's call it burnout because then I
Mhm.
know you were really working hard
Mhm.
and you worked so hard, you burnt out.
Yeah.
Whereas nervous breakdown insinuates that you're weak,
Mhm. I know it's
mentally,
I'm
mentally, that
always,
you're ill mentally. And I don't
yeah.
even like the word mental illness. I like the word mental injury
Mhm.
because really that's what it is. We're wounded internally still in some place in our system, in our heart, in our being, that feels like a threat to our nervous system and it's activating in your benefit.
Mhm.
I mean, we really have to talk about the neurology of what's happening here and the
Yeah.
biology of what's happening here. It's all
Yeah.
working in your benefit. It thinks you need extra healing. So why? And that's where I come in. I help people identify that.
Yeah. So it's your body's alarm system essentially saying it's
Yep.
like pain is our alarm system, right? Like when you touch the hot stove, you pull back, that's not a good idea. That's very painful. I'm not going to do that again. And or if you're about to step on a nail and you feel the pain of stepping on the nail and you pull back. And so you don't fully step on the nail because it started with that little pain, which signaled you to pull back. But when it comes to physical pain, there's usually a pretty obvious cause of the pain. And so then it's very obvious usually what you need to do to heal the pain, prevent the pain, whatever the case may be. But when we're talking about emotional pain, we tend to pretend like it's not there, shove it down, not really investigate the source. It's like I don't know why we treat physical pain and emotional pain so differently,
I mean,
but we
obviously it
do.
is. And I think hopefully over time this will change because it's just being talked about so much. But what I love to understand, and you're right, it is an alarm system. And I always say to my clients, there's a message in the mess.
Mhm.
Okay. So, like, think about what's going on in your system. Now, when it comes to burnout, this again is a philosophy I have. Um, we all develop these different parts of ourselves all the time, right? We say this language all the time. There's a part of me that wants to do this. There's a part of me that wants to do that. There's a piece of me that wants to do this. There's a piece of me that wants to do that. We've been
Mhm.
using this language for God knows how long. And I believe that everybody's made of many, 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 many parts. And there's a lot of theory around it and there's a lot of study around it. And if anybody's curious, you can learn about it
Mhm.
through something called internal family systems, which is a therapeutic model that's been around for 40 years. That's really parts driven.
Mhm.
But here's what I've recognized when it comes to burnout: all parts are benevolent. Okay. So there's a book called No Bad Parts. All parts, if we are made up of 100 parts, let's just say, every single part thinks it's your ride or die, and it thinks it's your BFF. And it has one job and one job only. It's to protect you from an emotional wound that is yet to be healed. So usually our parts are very proactive. Not all of our parts are proactive, some are reactive, but many of our parts are managing the ability to avoid an emotional wound
Mhm.
that's painful. So, what kind of managing parts show up that are associated with burnout? And I'll tell you what they are: people pleasing, lack of boundary setting, deprioritizing yourself, putting everybody else's needs ahead of yours, um, seeking validation, external validation being really important, and perfectionism.
Mhm.
Those are the things that cause burnout. So often, what I'm showing people is what parts did you need to develop in survival
Mhm.
early on in your life based on the lived experiences that you had
Mhm.
that put you in a position where it's really important to you that everybody's happy with you.
Mhm.
And that looks like people pleasing. And I'm not going to set any boundaries because I don't want you to be upset. Because if
Mhm.
you're upset with me, you may walk. And if you walk, then I could be alone. And then that will just further clarify and validate that I'm not worthy of being connected to. I mean, this is where it all
Mhm.
goes back to.
Yeah.
Okay. And I move there quickly with my clients.
Mhm.
So when we come up with these managers, we're doing it early on in childhood in benevolence, meaning as a young child, that's way too overwhelming. The concept that you might disconnect from me when we really just need a handful of things: water, food, shelter, and to know that we're worthy of connection. The worthy of connection piece is like our intense human birthright. We're hardwired for connection
Yeah.
physically in our body.
Mhm.
So if there's a threat, if we grew up in a household where, say, a parent used affection as as a weapon, in the meaning like if you don't show up the way that I like, I'm going to withdraw affection.
Mhm.
Right? We've seen
Yeah.
this a lot. I'm not
Mhm.
talking to you because X. I don't want to deal with you because of Y.
Mhm.
Then we quickly learn that feels horrible. And I'm so young, I don't even know how to manage that. And I also don't have the language to express it, but I'll
Yeah.
do anything not to feel it again. So, how do I need to show up? What parts of my authentic self do I need to shed in this
Mhm.
moment to meet your needs so I will not
Mhm.
feel this way? None of this is conscious, by the way. This is all happening in
Yeah.
like a split nanosecond
Yeah.
at a very unconscious level. But when we can see it works, it's pure cause and effect.
Yeah.
It just sticks because it's
Yeah.
brilliant. And it is
Yeah.
brilliant.
It is.
It's a
It is
perfect
brilliant.
coping strategy. It's the perfect normalization for an abnormal circumstance. It's not normal for a parent to use attention, affection, validation as a weapon. And by the way, the parent doesn't know that they're doing that.
Yeah.
They're only doing what was done to them and what they had learned. Like, this is
Mhm.
intergenerational trauma 101,
Mhm.
right? Like,
Mhm. They're
sometimes
unconscious to what they're doing.
it's not with malintent.
Mhm.
Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's not.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
And so we learn to make sure people are happy with us. And I feel like for women, this is much more. I see things with men a little bit differently, but within a feminine energy, I see the people pleasing. I see no boundary setting. Because God
Mhm.
forbid I set a boundary, then you might be unhappy with me. And if you're unhappy with me, dot, 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 this could lead to a disconnect.
Yeah.
Right? And I did that
Mhm.
once and that was horrible. Never again, which is the
Mhm.
motto of these parts, by the way.
Mhm.
Never again will I ever let her feel that because she doesn't know how to handle it.
Mhm.
Um, Making sure that you're happy at my expense. So deprioritizing my particular needs to make sure everybody else is happy with me,
Mhm.
seeking that out external validation by way of doing that. All of those things are a culmination of perfectionism.
Yeah.
Right? I don't want to make a mistake. I want people to be happy. So just think of like on your floor during a work hour, you
Mhm.
know the different personalities that show up. There's always going to be one person that's like, no, I'll do that for you. No, 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 it's fine. I'll do it. I'm happy to do it. And sometimes it is their desire to offload. Maybe they can see that
Mhm.
you're in struggle and they're happy to do it and they have the moment. But I help my clients identify what's the driving factor for the decision to show up that way?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
very often it's because I want them to like me. And
Yeah.
why do you need them to like me? Because I want everybody to like me.
Mhm.
Why? And we peel back the layers and pull back the layers so they can start to connect the dots. Once they can see it, they can't unsee it.
Mhm.
And then we start getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. What would it
Mhm.
look like to say no? What
Yeah.
would it look like not to jump in? It's not going to feel comfortable at
Yeah.
first. But
And
you're
what
not
would it
comfortable
look
right now
like?
anyway because you're burnt out.
Right. And what would it look like to have that person maybe not like you? And
Okay.
Be okay with that. Yeah, or at
right?
least be
So
able to tolerate it.
well, and honestly, what we're doing in that moment is getting closer back to our original authentic self,
Mhm,
right? As we drop these pieces of armor or layers of protection. And once they can be more connected with self, when we're aligned with self, we're just ultimately more confident
mhm, for
and
sure.
more self knowing. And so it's not as impactful,
Mhm,
right? Because if you know yourself and you know your truth and you know you're a good person and somebody else thinks you're not, if you know your truth, it's less impactful on you because
mhm.
it's someone's opinion. It doesn't have to be a truth.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. That's a huge part of yoga philosophy, so I totally understand that.
Yeah.
So if someone's here's the question. So let's say you develop these coping mechanisms in childhood, right? You don't even know it. You're walking around with
Yeah.
all these coping mechanisms, but you're doing okay. You feel good. You're
By the
happy.
way,
You're living your life.
highly praised.
Yes, highly praised. Yeah, right.
Highly
You're killing
praised.
it. You're killing it at life.
Killing
You
it.
feel good. You're
Give it
energetic.
to
You're
Katie.
happy. Right.
He'll do it great. Katie will do it to the best. Katie
Right.
doesn't need
Yes.
any
Lots of
extra support,
accolades.
lots of
Yes.
accolades, maybe even some money
Yes.
tied with those accolades. Like it can be very intoxicating.
Yes, 100%, I can see that. But what tips us over? So you're living life, you're doing good, you think you're crushing it, you're enjoying your job, you're enjoying being a mom, you're enjoying being a friend and a daughter and all the things. You don't feel anxious, you don't feel depressed, you don't feel like all the symptoms you said, the brain fog and the, lack of motivation and all that. And then all of a sudden that stuff starts to happen, right? So what's happening? What's the tipping point? Since you've had these coping mechanisms since childhood, and at one point in your life, they were really working for you, and you were really feeling like you were crushing it at life. And then all of a sudden you're finding it harder to get out of bed. You're finding, I don't really want to go to work today. You're finding that you keep forgetting things and you feel super overwhelmed. And every time you like sit down to work on something, you're like, wait, what was I doing? You want to take a nap all the time. Like where I think it can be a slow burn, not to, pun on burnout, but it can be a slow burn. And then it hits kind of this tipping point where you're like, whoa, I am not
I
okay.
think it's kind of your point. It's the slow burn. It can look from the outside like someone's killing it all the time.
Mhm.
And I have a current client right now that's like, if anybody knew I was talking to you, they'd be shocked because everybody thinks I have my shit together. I definitely look like I have my shit together. I'm in the right town with the right house with the 2.2 kids and the dog and the white picket fence. I've got a great job. I've got a great husband. Everything looks great and I make it look great, but I'm not okay.
Mhm.
And I'm not willing to tell anybody I'm not okay. Number one. So I don't know, honestly, if people go from I'm killing it to burnout quickly. I think people who genuinely have a wide window of capacity for life's challenges probably are less inclined to burn out. Now, we could have a scenario where life is good. I've learned how to balance motherhood and work. Let's just say, for example,
Mhm.
I have a wide tolerance for the way that life's presenting to me, and I do know how to do it.
Mhm.
But then a bunch of things happen in succession that just kind of tip it, like an ailing parent, or somebody's lost a job, or someone's very sick, or something like that. And we know we've just watched this happen. It just happens in culmination. Nothing ever happens in isolation,
Mhm.
right? We all know
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
What I'm going to say is sometimes our body has a normal reaction to the abnormal circumstance.
Mhm.
And we shouldn't always be running away from. Sometimes that's going to feel like that's too much for me. And you know what? I'll lie across the table from you and say, you're right. It is too much for you. Your
Mhm.
body's doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
So, how can we interject some self care, perhaps, into this scenario to widen that window of tolerance a little bit so you can manage the shit show that is currently right now?
Right. That is currently your life.
That is
Yes.
currently your life, because sometimes that happens.
Right.
You
Right.
know, I had a client recently come to me, and she is a business owner. She's got multiple kids. She's going through a really tough divorce. It's really contentious, all of these things. And there's a lot of stress. She's left to sell the house on her own, to unclutter the house on her own, to find a new place, to be managing the kids. Like, it's a lot. And she came to me. This was so great. I love her to death. She came to me for my hypnosis package. And by the way, my hypnosis package is more money than my coaching package. And I say that for a reason, because I said to her, with all due respect, I think you're going to be better off with just some straight up coaching. So I'm underselling myself. Okay. And I say
Yeah.
that because I want people to understand that. And she looks at me, she goes, "But I want the hypnosis package." And I was like, "Well, why?" And she's like, "Because I don't want to be feeling this." And I was like, "Okay,
Yes. Yeah.
why?" But like, I'm so sorry. There's no magic bullet for me to say to you that you're going to handle all of this chaos
Mhm.
without a little bit of pain.
Yeah.
But what I can do as a coach is give you some other tools that you can be using. Because right now, what we're doing is triage,
Mhm.
and it's going to be painful and it's going to suck.
Yeah.
To me, the RTT program I do and the hypnosis, that's like a surgery.
Yeah.
We have found one malignant area that no matter what you've done, you can't get past it. And let's see if we can go in and do some surgery to do some rewiring, some reprogramming, some refiring. But right
Mhm.
now, we're not at the surgery point. We are in triage,
Yeah.
and I can do triage with you.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing. And I think she sees why,
Mhm.
but like, sometimes life is too much, and our body is going to react exactly how it's designed to react. If you've already had a low bandwidth going into it,
Mhm.
it's going to be really, really tough. But to your point, you could be crushing it in life, and this could happen. It's okay to, this is the term, it's okay not to be okay. Like,
Mhm.
we don't need to pretend like we feel good in a scenario that would really just be crushing for anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess that's a question too. I mean, how do you know? So you mentioned very early in the interview how people will leave their job because or stop working altogether because they think it's the job and then they get out of the job and they either get a new job or they're not working and they think okay, it's still here. All these feelings are still here, so I guess it wasn't the job. So how do people know if this is circumstantial related to like a working environment maybe that's really unhealthy, or
Yeah.
they're in overwhelm from personal situations in their life, or is it this other component, this I've been, coping using these coping mechanisms my whole life that now are not working for me.
I mean, my what I want to say is it's kind of trial and error. Like, there's no like really great indicator. I mean, look, if you're in a toxic work environment, you kind of know,
Mhm.
right? Because everyone's probably talking about it in some way, shape, or form. And you just know that's not normal. Maybe you're talking to friends, they're not in similar work environments. Like, there's a little intuition there where you're like, something's not right. But
Mhm.
yet I have a dear friend. She was killing it on Wall Street, killing it on Wall Street. I mean, making numbers we can't comprehend.
Right.
And she knew that it was a very toxic work environment, but there was a risk reward. So I'm making a lot of money.
Yeah.
I'll take it. I'll take the hit, until she was like, wow, I'm literally a shell of myself. There's no amount of money that's worth my disconnect and how unhappy I am.
Yeah.
Right. So you kind of know sometimes when you're in a toxic work environment, if you find that everybody else at work is really happy and you're feeling very burnt out, let's just use that term, it's probably an indicator,
Mhm.
right? But sometimes it is like I had one acquaintance of mine that was working for a pretty big firm in New York. She used the terminology for herself that she felt very burnt out. She met with her boss, her supervisor, and they wanted to go over the annual goals for the next year. And
Mhm.
she said, "Listen, I don't think I'm gonna be here next year. Like, I've hit my wall. I'm burnt out. I'm not okay. And
Yeah.
I just can't even think about doing goals for next year." And the person in HR was like, "We have burnout leave." And she was like, "Wait, what?"
That's amazing.
And by the way, she'd been there for like 20, 25 years.
Yeah, and have no idea.
No idea. And they said, "Yeah, full pay 6 months, take a break." Oh,
Oh
yeah.
my gosh, that's an
So
incredible company.
so she took, well, is it though?
Well,
Because you have burnout leave. Like, how much time and money are you spending on burnout leave where you could be taking that money and actually creating an environment that doesn't lead to burnout,
mm,
if that's what's happening, right? It
mhm,
could be the
mhm,
environment, but again, it's how are we working within the environment?
right.
Anyway, she takes the 6 months, but exactly to your point, she says to me, "I was a mess in those 6 months. I didn't feel better. I was very confused. I've taken this massive weight off my plate and I still don't feel okay. I'm still a mess." So
Mhm,
then when the 6 months was over, she went back and said, "I just don't think I can come back. Like, I'm not okay." And this is
mhm,
a very high functioning person, by the way.
yeah,
Anybody that would meet her would be not know this.
yeah,
They said, "You can extend your leave, it's just no pay, but we'll give you
mhm,
another 6 months." So here it is, a year. And in
mhm,
that last 6 months, she started doing some very deep therapy work. I started working with a great therapist who uses internal family systems,
mhm,
who helped her identify it wasn't the job, it was the way she was working within the job. And honestly, once she reconnected closer back to self, she realized she didn't even want to be there to begin with.
yeah,
And now she had the courage and the confidence and the creativity to come up with what she did want to be doing and had
mhm,
the ability to go back and say, "Thank you so much for this time, but I'm not coming back."
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
But it took work. But that first 6 months, I think she thought, like, "I'll feel so great." And she was
mhm,
shocked.
yeah. And what you're saying, and you're not using this word, but it's the word that's coming to mind when you're describing this scenario is purpose. And how
Yes.
purpose aligns with burnout, right? So if you're in a
Yes.
job, a work environment, or even at home, wherever you are doing your thing, um, if you feel that you are on purpose, you're in alignment with your purpose, that you are
I feel great.
impactful, you are right. It makes you feel much more energetic. So, like, how much of this is, I'm overwhelmed because I have all these things on my plate that are just overwhelming my system, possibly, or possibly if you were in alignment and on purpose, you would not feel like it was too much
And
and,
I
and
think that that
overwhelming.
was a portion of what was going on in this particular illustration, because one of the things that was being shared with me was that there was this language being used by her parents
Mm,
and this pressure of, how could you possibly give that up? How
mm,
could you possibly do that? What if
mhm.
something happens? You
Yeah.
need to be independent. Da, 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 da. So there was all this influx pressure of, "You're
Mhm,
not making a good decision. We know better than you do." So it
mhm.
also required courage to go back and say, "I hear you. I don't agree with it. And I'm going to make my own decision." And we
Right.
see that in
Yeah.
ourselves.
Mhm.
So there was outside influence also, to your point, pushing up against her ability to stand tall and say, "That's not in alignment with what I want.
Yeah.
That's not what I want. That's what you want for me,
Mhm.
but that's not what I want." That takes guts in a lot of families.
Yeah.
So, and I know from my other friend, the one I was saying that was making hand over fist and was like, "I'll take the hit for the
Mm,
money."
mhm.
That was a big part of it too. There was a
Yeah.
lot of praise being received And actually, interestingly enough, and I don't know if this will speak to anybody that's listening, but in both cases, these were women who were first generation here,
Mhm.
who came from parents that came here and built from the ground up, right? And so now they were living this quote unquote American dream and making more money than these parents could ever have fathomed
Mhm.
in their
Mhm.
lifetime a
Mhm.
year. And they're saying, "What are you, crazy?
Right.
You're going to give that up?"
Yep.
So, again, to your point, there's this pressure of like, I don't want to disappoint. But
Mhm.
again, if I was working with this person, I'd say, because if you disappointed, then what? Then they'd be unhappy with me. And then what?
Mhm. Mhm.
And then they'd leave me. And I was like, but would they really?
Right. Right.
And you know what? In some cases, the answer is yes. And in some cases, the answer is no.
Yeah.
But they have to question these messages that are coming into their nervous system. And when we can have that dialogue, they automatically start to feel this dissipation of this
Mhm.
activation in their system. And they're like,
Mhm.
whoa, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's possible.
And I'm laughing and nodding, and I know our listeners can't see me, but um, because I literally, so I'm first generation, my
Okay.
husband is first generation. I literally had this conversation with my parents this week,
Okay.
and it has taken me a really long time to get to a point where I can say I love my parents. I'm so appreciative of everything that they did for me. Even all the lessons that they taught me that they thought were protecting me, which but were actually,
Absolutely.
placing these limiting beliefs on top of me, but that was not their intention. Their intention was to protect me, and I totally get that. Um, and to separate that from what I'm gonna do with my life.
Yes.
And, it took me a really long time to get there. But what happens is the fear comes in. So their fears that they laid on top of me because they wanted to protect me have now become an ingrained part of my own fears that are not about disappointing them, but about what if this happens? What if that happens? What if we could what if ourselves to death? Like we could shoot ourselves to death. Those are like the two
Yeah.
things that I feel like we could just go on forever. What ifing and shoulding. So anyway, that's why I'm laughing because it is so pertinent to me personally. And
Yeah.
I'm in this situation where I do have a high pressure job um, that can be too much at times. It can be just for anyone an overwhelming, you can have an overwhelming day or overwhelming several days or whatever the case may be. But I know for me personally, it's more about purpose, it's more about impact and feeling that I'm not having the impact that I desire and I'm not living on purpose. And so when I spend many hours of my life doing this, it feels extremely draining. And the
Yeah.
draining can come from it was just really crazy insane day and anyone no matter what, who went through that day would feel like they were burned out from that day. But
Yeah.
there can be many days that are not like that, and it still sucks the life force energy out of me. And
Yeah.
it's
And I
related to
think
purpose.
so. I do think purpose is a big part of it. And then the other thing I want to address, and I know we're probably coming,
Mhm.
short on time, but you tell me, it's your podcast.
I do want to get to what people can do. So let's talk
Okay,
about this
but
and
the
then
one
let's
thing I
talk
do
about that.
wanna bring up, just as a takeaway for people to consider, and then maybe we can even do another episode on just this, is the way the world is today should probably also be taken into consideration.
Mhm.
And I just was in a supervision group the other day, and we were talking about life's stressors. And the reality is that the pace at which the world moves today, the expectation at which the world moves today, the in constant, incessant um, peppering of information, constancy, the way
Mhm.
that the world is today is actually not designed for the human body.
Yes. So
And we have not evolved as human beings at the same
mhm.
pace of the way the world is moving. And so it
Mhm.
is overwhelming for the nervous system.
Mhm.
That's really important. And I have a great book behind me called The Myth of Normal.
Mhm.
and it's the subtitle is toxicity and illness in a no, it's trauma and illness in a toxic culture. And it's written by Gabor Mate. And I have not gotten through the whole book, I'll be honest. It's like a billion pages, but the reality is that we evolve as humans, right? We've gone from our very first iteration to where we are is a very huge evolution.
Mhm.
And it took a lot of time. Nothing evolved as quickly then as it is now.
Now. Yeah.
And so part of what's happening sometimes with the burnout is our bodies are not designed for this level of constant information
Mhm.
processing. It's a complete overload of the nervous system to the point where it will break down.
Mhm.
So I think it's really important for people to understand that too. And I think it is a part of the reason why I have a kid that's 20 years old, 19 years old, and I've never seen a generation with more anxiety, more stress, more overwhelm.
No.
And
Yeah.
I think part of it is because their bodies are trying to process at such a rate
Mhm.
that it's not designed and built for. It hasn't
Yeah.
evolved to it yet. So that's a whole other conversation. But I wanted to drop that in here because it shouldn't be disregarded
Yeah.
as
I
part of
no,
the
I'm
process.
glad you said that because, we're living in this is called the information age that we're currently in because information is at our fingertips. It's everywhere. It's exploding constantly. And you can look up anything at any time. It's literally at your fingertips. And our brains really were not meant to process the amount of information that is being thrown at us every day. And it is exhausting. It feels exhausting. And
Yeah.
I myself am a very curious person just by nature. I'm a super curious person. And so I actually have to limit myself in the amount of information that I take in because I can feel how exhausting it is to my body and to my brain.
Right.
But I'm naturally curious. So I want to know things. And so I'm always reading and listening to podcasts and reading, articles and books and all those things. But it is overwhelming. I think you are entirely right. And it does explain a lot of what's going on with our kids and our teens
Yeah.
because many generations have had to deal with a lot of really difficult stuff, this generation including, but many generations before have also had to deal with really world wars and great depressions and,
Yes.
parents who really didn't parent like, we probably should be parenting and so many different things, but this information piece is new.
I agree. And we're sentient beings. So it's not just what we're taking in through our mind. We feel things. I mean, we do
Mhm.
have that sixth sense, whether or not it's developed or not. And so, watching things, seeing things, hearing things, we can
Mhm.
feel that.
Yeah.
And that can be very overwhelming to the nervous system as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Even the act of, and I'll throw this out to my listeners just as a little fun thing to try. The act of putting your phone away somewhere during the day,
Yeah.
just putting it in a drawer, leaving it somewhere where you are not, in a room where you are not. Even if you have it with you and you're saying, I'm not going to turn it on, I'm just going to leave it in the room with me, there is a different feeling in your body when you choose to put it away somewhere and walk away from it.
Yeah.
And just try it out, just as a little experiment. And I would really encourage if you have teens to ask your teens to be doing the same thing throughout the day. Because you're right, we're sentient beings and that energy is felt. It is absolutely felt. So let's get to a little tips on what people can do if they're like, oh, I'm listening to this. I definitely think I'm in burnout.
I mean, I
What
think
are
that
some things?
that's the biggest takeaway is awareness, in my
Yeah.
opinion. And when I do workshops on burnout, which I do often, I always say step 1 is gain awareness. You've just gained
Mhm.
it either through this talk or this workshop. The second is get curious. So
Mhm.
we us to your point, we're in an information age. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of really great therapists, thought leaders, trauma specialists that spend a lot of time creating a lot of really great free content
Mhm.
that will allow you to further explore. One person I love is the holistic psychologist. Her name is Nicole LaPera. She's great. She kind of does like an overarching on all things, but anybody that works in the space of trauma, we're always touching on burnout because it's such a big part of it. Another person I absolutely love following, we're so in alignment with the way that we work, is Mastin Kipp, Mastin Kipp. Both of them have fantastic Instagram handles. If you're not on social media, they both have great YouTube channels. They both have books. They have websites. I highly recommend just starting there.
Mhm.
So we have so much access to like free knowledge. I
Mhm.
just think to myself, oh my God, how could my life have been different? I was suffering with so much anxiety and panic in my teenage years. What would it look like if I could have gotten this free access to
Yeah.
really great thought leaders in the space? The third thing I would recommend is give yourself a lot of grace.
Mhm.
So, no judgment zone. You do what you can with what you have when you have it.
Mhm.
And when you know better, you can do better.
Mhm.
So, no judgment on yourself of, oh my God, I can't believe I've been showing up this way. But no, none of that's
Yeah.
going to be useful or really relevant.
Mhm.
It's when I know better, how can I do better for me? It's all
Yeah.
part of your own personal learning journey,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then the fourth tip I always give is talk to somebody. And my personal recommendation is if you're going to go to the therapy route, mainly because either you're comfortable with therapy or it's going to be covered by insurance if you can find somebody. My recommendation, because I do believe everything goes back to trauma. People
Mhm.
can debate that, but that's my personal point of view. If you're going to find a therapist and that trauma piece is important, do not assume that they're trained in trauma because
Mm.
it is not a part of the inherent curriculum to become a therapist. They have to go through um, extra training, just like if you're working with an orthopedic surgeon, they
Yeah.
did their residency in orthopedics. They're
Yeah.
not just a general doctor.
Mhm.
If you're getting a general therapist, they'd have to go through extra training and extra certification to work in the space of trauma.
Mhm.
So there are things that you can do to ask them if they're trauma trained versus just trauma informed. Anybody can be
Okay.
trauma informed.
Okay.
You'd want to know what their access or their understanding to ACEs is. You'd want to know what kind of therapeutic models they use that are trauma based,
Mhm.
like EMDR or internal family systems. That's just some examples. Or work with a trauma trained coach. That's what I am.
Mhm.
And really, honestly, we go through some very rigorous training, but also rigorous credentialing
Yeah.
in order to be trauma trained, at least from my school,
Mhm.
and work with somebody that understands how your childhood experiences would have caused coping strategies that are no longer serving you today.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. That's awesome. Thank you so much. And I will put all those, those people's names that you mentioned in their
Yeah, I can
websites. I could put them in the show notes.
yeah.
Yeah. So that people can access those, and of course your website as well. Thank you again. I know you have a client coming up at 11:30, so I want to keep you on time, but thank you again for coming back and sharing more of your wisdom and your knowledge. It is an information age and it can be overwhelming, but also we can learn how to curate our information and take what we really need and leave the rest
Absolutely.
behind. So
That's what I do every day.
me too.
Curate.
Curate, cut the fat. And we can't know all things, right? All of us can't know all things, but we should know the things that are going to make the biggest impact on our lives, and then we can make the biggest impact on the world at large, right? So if
Yep.
we're in a good place, then we can do the work that we were sent here to do, and we can have a beautiful impact on this world. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for being back. I will definitely have you on again because there's more topics that we can talk about.
So much
So
fun.
it's the Stacey series. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank
And we
you.
will be in touch.
Thanks so much.
All right. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you got some clarity on what burnout is and what, if you are experiencing it, what things in your life that could be potentially contributing to it, and some ideas about what you can do about it. Um, I know in my life I have experienced burnout. It is not a great feeling at all. And I've done a lot of work to work through it, but also, it's like anything else in life. We go through hills and valleys, right? So there are periods of time where even though we may have worked through our burnout, it may come back and rear its ugly head again. So it's something that we all go through, and it's not something that we need to feel guilty about or feel is unfixable, or feel like there's something wrong with us. It's really a natural part of life, and there are things that we can do to feel better. So, as far as our mindful moment for this week, I would like to offer up that suggestion that we talked about in the show towards the end with our cell phones. Our cell phones are, attached to us at all times in the society that we live in. And in this information age, they are a constant source of giving and receiving information. And so I invite you to do two different things. One would be to take a brain break from your cell phone. So put it away somewhere, either turn it off or put it on silent, and then leave the room. Whatever room you leave it in, go to a different room. And just take a period of time where you are away from all the information that's coming at you from your cell phone and see how you feel. See how you feel in your mind, see how you feel in your body. If you really want to be, an A+ student, you can take that time to do a little meditation. You can use one of my meditation mini-sodes or a little breath work, again, through one of my mini-sodes or YouTube or wherever you get your stuff from. And I also invite you, on top of doing that, um, is to take mini brain breaks from your cell phone by intentionally keeping it away in those short windows of time that we often have throughout the day that could be periods of presence, periods where we can intentionally choose to be very present. So these would be things like standing in line at a store, a grocery store, or some other store, or maybe sitting in a doctor's office waiting room, or sitting even at a red light. How many of us pull out our phones when we're sitting at a red light? These are those little windows of time during the day where we don't have anything to do. And so many of us, myself included, I've been very guilty of this, will immediately pull out our cell phone to see if we can answer a text message or send a text message or an email, or maybe quickly scroll through social media, or whatever the case may be, that we're using this tiny window of time to try to cram some productive activity into this tiny window of time. And what I invite you to do is, when that urge comes, to recognize it, breathe through it, and then intentionally choose to not do it and be really present in the moment. So look around, see what you see what you hear, feel into your body, feel what's going on there. If you are with other people, maybe consider striking up a little conversation with the person next to you in line or sitting next to you in the doctor's office, and see how it feels to take a break from the information, from both the giving and the receiving of information. See how it feels in your body and your mind. You may feel that that little break really gave you a lot more energy or a lot more incentive to go on and do the thing that you have to do. You might just feel really re energized from taking these small breaks from the constant barrage of information that we get in our lives, and taking that time where you're stepping away from the information to be just very present in your body. So I invite you to do both of those things and let me know how you feel. As always, the newsletter will come out this week, which will give you more ideas about burnout and what we can do to help ourselves if we feel like we are in burnout. If you haven't signed up for my newsletter, you can go to my website, momontheverge.org, and sign up there. It's also in the links in my bios of my social media sites. It's also in the link tree. I have a link tree in my show notes, so lots of ways to access it. And then the other thing I have for you is a new freebie. I have my mindfulness freebie, which has been out for a while. I have a new freebie on your purpose, finding your purpose. We talked a little bit about that in the show, and how purpose and burnout are definitely linked. And sometimes finding our purpose is really hard. And when we are not living on our in purpose, it often can lead to the feelings we talked about, the burnout feelings of being in overwhelm, or just feeling exhausted, or having little interest in things we like to do. So I created this little freebie to help get you started on your way to finding your purpose, something I struggled with for a really long time. So I know the pain of it. I know the pain of not knowing that you're meant to do something, you're meant to be here for a reason, but you're not really sure what it is, and you can't figure it out. You've tried and you can't figure it out. So this is a little guide that can help you do that. So I hope you enjoyed that. And I will see you next week. As always, have a wonderful week, my friends. Hi, everyone. If you enjoyed this episode or any of our other episodes, I ask that you please like the show, follow, subscribe, or share. The way that podcasts work is the more people that do one of those things, the more likely it is that when someone's looking for a podcast to listen to, our show will pop up for them. I started this podcast because I really see there's a great need in our world for people to feel more peace, joy, love, and acceptance in their lives. And I think we can do that when we have a greater sense of self-awareness. We could become conscious creators of our own lives. And I'm seeking to do that for as many people as possible. So if you could help me by liking, sharing, or subscribing to the show, I'd really appreciate it. And hopefully someone hears a conversation that changes their life. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time. Much love.